it's Cara here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am working in my Dina Wakley ledger journal. It's a little bit bigger than A4 sized, just sort of top to bottom, which I quite like because when you've got an A4 image like this, it does give you a little bit of space around it. This image is from the Collage Soup collaboration with Neve Bailey. It's called Fundamentals. It's on the title page, but I really liked her, so I'm just going to fussy cut her out. And then I was going to do a single page, but I do end up doing a double page spread. So I don't really like fussy cutting, but obviously to use these images, you need to cut them out. So here I am. Right, so I've got my image there. I'm just going to use my craft knife to cut the insides out. It is a lot easier than using scissors on those little bits on the insides of your images. You know, in arms, sometimes you have between the legs, etc. So yeah, use yourself, do yourself a favour and use your craft knife. It is a lot better. So here, what I've decided to do is, as one of the ledger pages is blank, I've decided to try and add some text onto it by using this stencil. It's a Crafter's Workshop stencil. I will put the code in the description below. So I just thought that that looks quite nice on the back there. Now, what I have made the error of doing is popping that on and then I cover the whole thing up. So I do go back in later and pop some more on there. So don't worry, although I cover it up, we put it back. What I've got here is just some cheap purple children's craft paint, and I've mixed it with some white to give me this kind of lilac-y, more muted tone of purple or lilac. And I'm just scraping that on with my palette knife just to give me some nice texture in the background of my page. There's the magenta going in my palette, and again just adding some white to that to do exactly the same to give me like a more of a muted down paler pink to put in there to tie in with the lady's lovely dress. Now, as I said, I was just going to do this one page, and as I was drying it, I decided because the image is quite big, I'm going to go ahead and do the other page. So here I am doing exactly the same with my palette knife and the rest of that purple on my palette, and then I'm going to go in and do the same with the pink, just like that one. I'm then going to dry those pages off because that is quite a lot of paint to have on your pages, and I want to do some stenciling over the top. If I lay my stencil down onto wet paint, obviously all that's going to happen is my stencil is going to stick to that page. So do make sure that you dry your layers before you do stenciling. So here I am back with that Crafter's Workshop stencil, realising obviously that I took away all the text that I put in. And so I grab out my ink pad. It's a Ranger ink pad. Can't think of what it's called right now, but it's a permanent one. And I'm just using this brush to put it on very lightly so that it's just subtle in the background. I do then decide that I want a little bit more to stand out. So I've grabbed some black paint and another little sponge there. They're just cheap sponges from the £1 shop here in the UK, or in the UK from when I was in the UK. And I'm just going to pop that through the stencil in 3 places on my page. I like to do my main stenciling in 3 sections, just so that it's pleasing to the eye. So you can see that that painted stenciling does show up a lot more than the one with the ink, which is obviously very subtle and in the background, which I like. So I audition where my lady's going to go for a bit there, decide that it's going to go where she's now put rather than on the other page. And then I'm sort of looking at what stencils I've got to add to my background. So here I've got this Lattice stencil. This is also just a cheap one from the £1 shop in the UK. And I'm just putting it on a little bit of gesso, again with one of those sponges, just to add some more depth and a little bit more interest to my background, but keeping the tones sort of neutral and pale with the light white. It's not like a bright white. I've got barely any paint or barely any gesso on my sponge, so it's not as white as it could be. It's not crisp, it's kind of muted. And here I am again, just every now and then pop your focal point back on just to make sure she's basically where you want her to be. Now I've grabbed the dark purple paint without adding any white to it. I am going through this star stencil just to add some of that darkness back in and a few sections of stars sort of sprinkled across my page. So again, I'm looking at where my focal point is going to be so that I don't cover up all the lovely stenciling with my image. Now I've put some magenta into my palette again, and I've added some more white. I'm trying to get a nice pale pink again. I've decided that I'm going to stencil some flowers onto my lady's dress. Now, one thing that Neve does a lot in her videos is talk about altering your images. Just because she's given you a lovely lady with a pink dress does not mean you cannot change it and make it your own. Excuse me. So what I've done here is I've just popped a very pale pink through that stencil, flowery stencil that is. That one is actually from Hobby Lobby in America. Just to give my lady's dress a bit of interest. So Neve quite often draws all over hers with Posca paint pens. You could use other scraps of material to make, you know, the skirt different from the top, etc. Do whatever you want. It's your image. It's just there as a base. Then I added some white splatter using a paint pen. Just by activating that ink and splattering that across my page, that gave me some splatter. And then I've added a little bit of stamping just again to those 3 areas where the stenciling is, just so that I've got another bit of sort of texture going on in the background, building that interest. I grab out my archival ink again, and I've got that same sponge. I'm just going around the outside of my image so that she's got a little bit of shadowing and it looks like she's jumping off the page rather than being a flat image. Once I've done that, I'm just going to glue her down with a glue stick. What I will say is that make sure you glue them down really well. This paper's really nice and thick, and so that's why I'm pressing onto it. Sometimes, depending on your glue stick, you might have to re-stick, or you could also use matte gel medium. I just don't have any here in Morocco at the moment. Then, because I've got this black paint left on my palette, I decide instead of using my usual fine liner border, I'm going to use the black paint. So I'm just using the sponge, scraping it across the edge of my pages, just to give me a lovely, fine but rough and ragged black border around the page, which when I remove those back pages that I'm using to protect the rest of the book, you will see. I also decided I wanted a little bit more blackness in the image itself, or in the page itself. So I've grabbed this chevron stencil. Again, it's a cheap one. I believe this came from Temu. I don't tend to spend a lot on my sort of background builder stencils because I don't need to. You can get them from Pound Shop. You can get them, you know, online. But I do spend money on my stencils if there's something I want, like a Dina Wakley or an Art by Marlene. So yeah, just make sure that you're getting the stencils you want. Yeah, so I've done that in those 3 places again, just overlapping all the other stenciling and keeping them going in the same direction. When you've got directional stencils, it's quite important that you keep them all in the same direction. Otherwise, your page will just look like a big old mess. In my opinion anyway. Obviously, if you find that you like that look on your page, then you do you. I've then got this broken line stencil, which I've used to drag through some paler paint. And I'm just going to put that in those 3 sections again, as you can see, just to give that little bit more texture. Now I've grabbed out one of my fine Posca paint pens. These are acrylic paint in a pen, if you don't know what a Posca paint pen is. They're brilliant because they dry and they are permanent. So I'm just outlining my lady. I'm doing this one quite carefully. Quite often I use quite sketchy lines, but for this one, I've gone around her quite carefully. You just do you. Sometimes I do sketchy, sometimes I'm quite careful. So you don't even have to outline if you don't want to. Now I've pulled out my quote stickers. Now these are some Art by Marlene quote stickers, sentiment stickers. They come in a little book, but I cut the top off because it's spiral bound and it's much easier for me if they lay flat when I'm packing them in and out of my supplies case. Also, what I'm doing here is removing the sentiment because I decided I don't quite want the whole sentiment. So again, like the images, use these as you want them, not necessarily as they come. I've cut a couple of the words out of that sentiment to make it say what I wanted it to say. Sorry about my head popping in there. I was obviously trying to get right in. Yeah, so use them as you want, you know, take one word from the quote or use it as a whole. That's entirely up to you. You don't have to use as is on your sentiments or on your images there. And then these few little ones I'm just sticking over the lady's dress. These are Tim Holtz Small Talk sentiments. Again, use as you wish, cut them up if you want, or use them as whole ones. Now I've just got my fine liner and I'm just going to go round with sketchy lines this time, all of those sentiment boxes, just so that they can pop out from my page. You'll see them in the close-up, which is coming now. So thank you guys for coming back to my channel and watching. I will be back again on Friday at 5 for your Friday Art Escape. Until then, I hope you all have a great weekend. Please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing, and I'll see you soon. Bye.